Welcome back to the Coffee and Contemplation with Susan Dunlop podcast, where we explore stories and insights that inspire and empower individuals to live fulfilling lives. Today, I'm excited to have Shaté Hayes, founder and CEO of Career Steward Inc. in Atlanta, on the show. Shaté is a creative career strategist with a unique background that spans from professional dance and choreography to corporate leadership in workforce development. Her mission is to help professionals find purpose and joy in their work, leveraging her experiences with identity crises, self-doubt, and overcoming challenges. Shaté's journey can guide you to step up or reach your full potential, to create a career that fully resonates with who you are at your core, in your heart, mind, and soul. I have included Shaté's professional bio in the show description on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. But right now, I'm really keen to get this conversation started. Welcome, Shaté.
Thank you so much for having me, Susan. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our chat. And I feel it rolls on from where I've just been with a mini-series that's talked about, organizational culture that really respects the people that they have within their organizations. And I feel when you and I spoke in our first chat, it was like a perfect linking to where that conversation was leading to. So thank you for saying yes to coming on the show.
Yes, I'm excited too. Can't wait.
In terms of the flow of the conversation, you emphasize the importance of career fulfillment and aligning work with personal passions. What are some common signs that someone might be experiencing career dissatisfaction, and how can they begin to address these issues?
That's a really great question. And I'll draw from my own personal experience as well as like an experience being a people manager. The way it showed up for me is that I was all of a sudden sort of like not looking forward to doing the work in a way that I used to. And it was surprising. So I'm speaking of my dance career. I was working semester after semester, teaching numbers of courses. And I always looked forward to the end of semester concert where I got a chance to choreograph all my students. And, it was I love stage performance and preparing for a live show. And so this one particular semester, I remember sort of thinking like, here we go again, versus like, ooh, when am I going to choreograph this year? So there was a shift that had taken place. And I still went through it and worked in excellence, but there was something about it that just wasn't as exciting anymore. And I think that there are moments in everyone's career that there are things that you don't like to do. Like every job, even if it's a dream job, has parts of it that aren't super exciting. But this felt like it was persisting. Like more and more, I felt like I had sort of outgrown it, is the best way that I can explain it. And then what I've seen in sort of like people on my team, direct reports, when someone isn't happy with their work, they're disengaged. The work isn't that great, quite honestly. Like they're not performing at their highest level. There's probably, I've experienced this one too, maybe some frustration, like everything annoys you. You know what I mean? Like you can't get on the same page. There's friction about everything. And so there's just like an angst about the person, an energy that is just like not, you can, I know what alignment feels like. It feels like ease and flow and peace, and not that there isn't any friction or challenges, but it just feels like the right path. Whenever there is not alignment, it just feels like stuck energy, stuck, stale, anxious, angry, frustrated, disconnected energy. And that's what career dissatisfaction is, in my opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
And from an organisational perspective, so we were just looking at the signs as someone who may be experiencing that. But when you're looking at it at the organisation that those people were in or coming to you from, what do you see is something that's missing in those organisations for those people?
I'll speak from the organization where I was. I can't speak for every organization, but what I've seen is it's usually that someone, like, the role has changed. So especially in the tech space, when jobs are changing so quickly, strategic priorities are shifting, right? Things that mattered yesterday might not be as important. You're having to reprioritize. And so if the nature of a job is shifting that quickly, certain skill sets, I think, that were maybe super important at one point they start to shift as well. And so now, we need adaptable professionals who might, I don't want to say who are generalists, but who can probably shift and still perform well in ever changing environments that way. So I think sometimes, or what I have seen in one specific case, is that because the nature of the job shifted, then the person wasn't as successful in that shift, or maybe just wasn't even that fond of the shift to begin with. And so that compromised their happiness with the
Mm.
role. I can also say that if a team member doesn't feel like their personal career is valued, like they have somewhere to go, that the leadership is mindful of what they personally care about, if that's not at play, if they don't feel safe, they don't have psychological safety, then that also impacts their satisfaction. So it's a little bit of like the nature of the role, the culture of the team and the organization, and sort of the psychological safety and whether or not a person feels like they have room to grow in the role. I think all plays a part in satisfaction for sure.
And seeing as we're at the other side of COVID-19 times, and people obviously have had that quite a disruption to how their day-to-day work was, what did you see was the impact with that on people that you work with?
I think the largest impact that I saw is that people are way more mindful of career fulfillment. People no longer want to just have a job just to have it. It brought to the forefront how like fragile life is, what folks want to be doing with their days. If life is short, quote unquote, how do I want to be spending my days? I want to be working on things that matter. I want to be working with people who are kind. I want an organization where we have shared values. I want an organization that, is speaking out about injustices. So like what mattered to people shifted. And so you see that
Yeah.
increasingly in the jobs that people left and the jobs that people are looking out, for to join. Like it just, how many people have, I think they called it an entrepreneur's exodus. How many people have left corporate to start their own businesses? Like people are wanting to have values aligned careers or jobs. And they also want to sort of have the flexibility to live their lives and have their careers on their own terms, in my opinion.
Mm. Mm. I know in Australia, Melbourne went through something like 6 lockdowns in the time of COVID. My youngest daughter was part of that, and like her university was closed, so she had to stay at home to do university, and that was so not in her space of being present when it was to do with architecture.
Yeah.
Most of their jobs were gone. So it was a really tough thing to watch, but we saw also what we call the quiet quitting, that people were deciding long before the lockdowns finished that they were heading out of Melbourne. I live in southeast Queensland, and people just flooded up here and bought up property and have done what you said, that entrepreneurial creation has come out of them and said, I've got to just work for myself. I can never do that again.
Yeah, definitely an awakening, I feel like, across cultures, the globe. Yeah, awakening of some
Yeah,
sort.
yeah. Shaté, you shared with me earlier the value of seeing people in their right roles to ensure they feel heard and have a voice. How do you identify the right roles for individuals, and what strategies do you use to match the people with positions where they can thrive?
That was probably one of my most favorite parts of being a leader when I got to match. And it's not surprising that it's one of my favorite parts of the work that I do in my own business, like matching people with the careers or, jobs that would light them up. So if I know that someone's not lit up, right, that sort of clues me into like to be paying attention. But it rarely ever got to the point where it was that bad. Because one of the things that we had as part of a system was to have quarterly career conversations. And it could happen more than quarterly, but there was like an official, this is when we're talking about what's going on with your career. It was like a check-in, like, how are you feeling about the work? What do you want to be doing in the future? Do you feel like the work that you're doing right now is supporting that vision and those types of things? And I sort of used that along with what I knew about them as an individual, what was important to them. I used that to really be mindful of the projects that were coming down, the pike, and who would be matched to what. And we would also do these things each quarter, like retreats. And we would have these team building activities where we sort of would do exercises like, I forget the official name of the exercise, but you have these 4 columns, A, B, C, D. And as a team, each person puts what parts of their job fits into the A, B, C, D column. So your favorite work is in A. B, C is like, I'll do it, I'm not crazy about it. And D is just like, oh, I hate when I have to do this. With the understanding that every job is likely to have some deep portion of it, but we want the overwhelming majority of your work to feel like A and B work. And so we would sort of assess those types of things. And with that information, along with the conversations we were having regularly, along with the way that the work was changing and the business was evolving, I was always able to sort of be like, okay, how would you feel about if you owned this project? Doesn't mean that they like completely dismiss the role that they were hired for, but I really looked for opportunities to give them projects doing the work that they were most excited about, especially if it would make way for them to transition into that type of work in the future, for example. There's also been cases where folks were like looking to transition, like change jobs. Maybe they were looking for a promotion, they were ready to move on, and like they just kept applying for things and it never worked out. And so even sitting with those folks and saying, okay, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Let's take a look at your background. It sounds like you're probably looking for the wrong types of work. Let's talk about how we can tell the right story so you can like move into something that is more aligned with you. And I've had a couple of opportunities to even, this doesn't always work out this way. And this is definitely the exception, not the rule. But in a situation where maybe the team is growing, maybe it's a little bit young, we're still sort of establishing different roles. I've had the opportunity to sort of design different roles for folks based on what work needed to be done. And so those were always really exciting moments too.
A lovely way to approach it. But when they're doing that, do they understand how that fits into the bigger picture of the organisation's overall outcomes?
I believe so. Like in terms of it's all a matter of how you approach it. So we were
Mm.
very much, and I had the pleasure of working with a very high performing team who always wanted to know the why and the context of it. So we had a system where you knew clearly what the organization, like the overall company's goals were, you know, what the overall department, like larger departments' goals were, and then how our team's goals fit into that. And so we sort of would have these roadmaps where, like, these are the projects that need to get done over the next couple of quarters. This is what it looks like to lead them. And this is what needle it moves for the team, the department, and then the overall company. So there was always that type of conversation happening. And if it ever was not clear, I had a team that was very vocal about, saying, hey, I don't understand why we're doing this, or, can you help me understand what's going on here.
Okay. So you talked about that being a youngish team, is that what you're saying?
At a certain point, it was. So when I first joined the team, I would say this particular team, there were probably like two or three people on it. And by the time I left the organization as a senior director of that team, there were 20 something, 30 people on the team. So it definitely had grown, like evolved over a number of years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you see that with organisations that have been established a long while, any issues in between the demographics, the ages of the people and what they used to like to work like, and then they're needing to bring this new blood, this new thinking, the people who are interested in the why. Have you seen any clashes that you've had to help unravel to help them smooth out the path forward?
That's a good question. I've seen clashes in some ways, but not in a way. And I don't think it had anything to do with age, quite honestly. I think some people have a preference for a more stable work environment. So even
Mm.
on the team within the same age ranges, I had people who were like, I'd like to show up to work every day and know exactly what's happening. And I want that to stay the same for
Mm.
the majority of the time. And I've actually had to have conversations with people that said, hey, like, I totally understand that. Like, that is a reasonable request. And it's just not necessarily the culture of this organization. It also depends on the industry that you're in. So in the space that we're in, which is ed tech, it's a tech organization first and foremost. So like it's moving quickly. But if this person came from like higher ed, where things move much slower, right? So that you could understand where that sort of gap, the culture shock kind of came from if you're coming from higher ed into an ed tech space. So yeah.
When I started my organisation, it was back in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
So I owned that company for 16 years and we employed over 6,000 nursing staff and care staff
Mhm.
as labour hire.
Wow.
So we had everyone, absolutely everyone. But I could tell there was that sort of positioning of people going, back then it was called Gen Y. Oh, Gen Y, and it's like this really sort of disparaging,
Yeah.
but then it also put like this barrier. That's what I'm thinking was the barrier that came up of going, well, I don't know how to deal with that.
Mhm.
So we're going to have to make them come our way, or we're going to have to make our organization fully shift to accommodate people we don't really understand. And I feel that that could still be part of organizational issues.
I'm sure there is. And there's this really great book I remember reading. Leaders Eat Last, I think is the right one, Simon Sinek. And it's
Mm.
really talking about, some of those generational differences in terms of like how you're leading people, which I found really, really helpful to sort of just have an awareness around. I would say, we were talking even before you started recording about learning companies and how if those perks really work. And I think a lot of the perks that I've seen, at least in the ed tech space, really speak to some of those expectations, quite frankly, now of maybe like younger generations. So, what's your professional development looking like? It's almost, I've worked in several different organizations where a director report might say, okay, what professional development are you all paying for? Like an expectation. I want to go to this workshop. Are you going to pay for it? And then affinity groups, right? To speak to their values and like who they are to make sure that they have belonging. And then all of these other type of cultural experiences to really make, whereas before probably work was literally just about showing up every day and producing some certain outcome, it's become so much more about the life of the company, what it stands for, and
Yeah.
what it feels like to be a part of that organization.
Yeah. As I said, I supplied healthcare and aged care, and there was a common terminology was, nurses eat their young.
Mm,
And it was that sort of retiring nurse era.
yeah.
And they were hard on the new nurses coming through. Nurses who trained probably in the 80s were hospital trained nurses. And then there's the university trained nurses coming through. So it was a really interesting battlefield,
Yeah.
really, in the way they operated. And you could see the overall impact on that, on nurses choosing to become a nurse, but to throw themselves out the other side as quickly as they could to go into different roles and not be that nurse on the floor. So, for that particular industry,
Mhm.
it was in, out, in, out, in, out. People just didn't want to stay and put up with that type of the older ways that were still being allowed to perpetuate workplaces.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you said Gen Y, but what's it now? Gen Z? Like those
Mm.
those folks like talk about tenure and they have no desire to stay somewhere. I'm generalizing here. Stay somewhere for years and years on end. They're thinking a couple years, let me get what I can get out of this and I'm moving on to the next thing. So, yeah, I can
Yeah.
see some of that generational like difference that you're talking about.
You've dealt with identity crises and self doubt in your
Yeah.
career. How did you navigate these? And what advice do you have for professionals facing similar issues?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, both of those things caught me completely off guard. So, I mentioned before my professional dance career, I was starting to feel like I had this feeling of I'm ready for more, but I don't know what the more is. I just know that this isn't it anymore. I've outgrown this thing. So I took the leap of faith. And then to have this identity crisis was completely shocking because I chose to leave. It wasn't like I got booted out or fired or laid off. I actively said I want to do something different. And so to sort of be then looking for what the next thing was and faced with this question of like, oh, I'm gonna not be dancing now? Like, what does that mean? And who am I if I'm not a professional dancer? To the point where I literally didn't want to leave the house. So one of the
Oh,
criteria for me in my next role was like, I'm going to have to work from home because I don't know how to face the professional world as anything other than a professional dancer. It just didn't feel right. And I mean, in terms of how to navigate that, I'll answer it similarly to someone asked me a question recently like, how do you overcome rejection? And I have to say it's the same way with this, the same answer here. There's no way through it except through it. You just have to keep trying the thing. There's no yeah, I guess if I had to try to find something, I would say I did have to give myself permission to change, like permission to evolve, because some of that other mind trash was, why do I want to change careers? Nobody else I know is changing careers. My parents stayed in their job for decades, and my friends, went to law school and now they're still lawyers, or they went to medical school and they're still doctors, right? And so I was sort of like beating myself up for evolving in this way. And eventually I had to just give myself permission to evolve and
Mm.
just take my time figuring out what the next thing was. And I would say the other thing is, in that transition period, I was still working in some capacity. And so before I left, being a professional dancer, choreographer, dance educator, I had already started working with dancers on how to build a sustainable career. I was teaching them the things that, I wish I had known. And so I started pouring all of my energy into like that sort of type of work. And I was blogging and podcasting and writing for Dance Magazine and writing for Point and just talking to people about what it looked like to have a sustainable dance career. And that really, really helped me to sort of figure out, there's that saying, the path is made by walking. Like I don't think I could have just sat and thought and reflected my way to the next step. But in the practice of sort of building this other thing, it became clearer to me like, oh, I actually really deeply adore career development as a field. I want to do more of this. I want to stay connected to higher ed. I started these sort of markers around my values and what I wanted to do next started to become clear, to the point where I was like, oh, as soon as I understood what it is that I wanted to focus on, the next opportunity like showed up overnight almost.
Wow, but it's a journey, isn't it? It's a
Mhm.
having freed yourself or set yourself free to go and find that. And yeah, our little inner critics that are not necessarily our own voices, it's stuff that other people have said in other places,
Yeah.
can show up in those times.
Mhm.
And yeah, I get that. I set myself free from my own company as I said, I want to actually leave all the titles behind.
Mm.
I want to now go and see who I am beyond being that person who built that company.
Ooh.
And out the other end, it's like, who am I?
Yeah.
As you just said, who am I really?
Yeah.
What did I even do? I don't know what I did do. And, we won awards, everything, but that self doubt, it's like, I just had to keep on moving forward.
Yeah, that's powerful, Susan. Yeah, who am I? And sort of finding yourself on the other side of that. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. So your company, Career Steward,
Mhm.
when did you form that?
So actually, it was a name that I had lurking around since the fall of last year, so this time last year, but I officially made the leap at the top of this year. So February of this year, I officially was like, I'm doing this. I'm going to figure it out.
Lovely, lovely. I love your website too. I had a really
Thank
good look
you.
around when I was doing my due diligence, and yeah, I loved how you've got that set out. So it focuses on helping professionals live their purpose and love their work.
Mhm.
So, what actionable steps or strategies do you recommend for individuals seeking, more significant meaning,
Mhm.
satisfaction in their career,
Mhm.
apart from just coming and talking to you?
I love that. Yes, please come and talk to me.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
3 simple steps, I like to say, and, it is match, make, and market, and so in that match phase, that is literally like there is no career fulfillment without fully understanding who you are and making sure you're targeting the right thing, and so that looks like strengths assessments. I love Gallup, those assessments. There's DISC, there's tons of them. It looks like reflecting in this phase and then putting together what comes up from that reflection and researching, like figuring out what's out there, having conversations with people who are doing different things so that you can learn more about it. It's literally an inside out approach. You have to start with who you are, what's inside, what makes me tick, what do I care about, what's the vision for my life? What are some things that I think have been great experiences in my career? What are some things I hated and why? Like all of that. You got to put all of that into sort of like this pot of gumbo, right? And see what
Mm,
emerges on the other side of that and come up with a target or two or three, right? And start pursuing those. The second step is the make, and that's where you're upgrading your language. And so probably one of my favorite parts of all of this process is the storytelling of it. So, in my example, I could not go from a professional dancer choreographer to, a career coach in workforce development space talking about how many jazz classes I had taught or, how many productions I had choreographed, because that didn't matter to that new role. That didn't matter as much to the sort of professional I was becoming. So I had to find the through line and tell that story and tell it well and tell it consistently. And so that part is important. And then the last step is just market. That's how you strategically connect with the people who you're meant to serve. And that could be the roles that you're interested in. If you're starting a new business, is it your potential clients? It's like, how are you leveraging your network fully equipped with that aligned target, fully equipped with that new story, and how are you getting out there sort of, you know, um, making the path by walking it?
Mm. Of that, the storytelling, the through line, I think that would deeply resonate and be so helpful for so many people. We muddle around with it so much in our own businesses.
Yeah.
Have you got any particular workshops or anything you do for people, or have you got any blogs focused on that part of the work that you do?
The storytelling part specifically, that's a really good question. I actually have. So for folks who are on my list, literally almost I email every weekday a different career story, like for inspiration. Lately, I've written tons of things about storytelling to them, like how do you talk about your college major when you don't use it anymore, or how do you tell your story when you don't think you have anything special to tell, right? I'm actually going to be turning all of those into blog posts. So this is such a timely conversation. And probably within the next month or two, I'll have like a good collection of some of those stories I've already shared with my subscribers out on my website.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's really good. As I said, I just feel like it's just the era of storytelling, to understand people at that deeper level.
I
Yeah.
love that. And it's so, just to double down on how important it is literally the difference between staying stuck and moving forward. And it's something else that I've written to my community about lately is just, if people don't understand who you are, then you're not moving forward in what it is that you're trying to do. So you have to be able to not really just tell stories in terms of like, one day I went to the store and they were like, not that. It's like, how are you conveying the value of who you are and what you have to offer? Like, that's the story you got to figure out how to tell. And it's really about spotting like the patterns in
Yeah.
in your background and what you're trying to move forward to. That matters, and telling those stories.
And you've done that beautiful work with your clients beforehand
Mhm.
in going into those strengths and what went well before, and
Mm.
really drawing on all that richness of them. And I think in our very first chat, you talked about, you sort of see there's a spiritual connection to all
Mhm.
of this.
Mhm.
And I love that piece as well. Can we just talk about that for a moment?
Absolutely. And just to touch on even the reason why that match phase is so important is because that's where the uncovering of the patterns happens, right? Like, you have to
Mm.
lay it all out on the table. I don't know if anyone likes puzzles like I do, but like getting a puzzle, you pour all the pieces out and you just turn them all over and you're like, okay, what is this thing? Right? And then you start to put the pieces in place. That, I think, is how it is with all of us and all of our professional stories. It's like, okay, let's pull out all the pieces of who you are, let's turn them all over, and let's see like what's the story that the pieces are telling us. The reason I feel like it's so spiritual is because I think we all came here like wired for something specific. That is why we all have different interests and different strengths and different skills. When I was in grad school, I did my graduate research on the intersection between creativity, dance, and like spirituality. And what I was trying to get at is, this thing that I do that I love, it feels beyond passion. It feels, when I'm teaching someone some movement, I was thinking about being in Shanghai and teaching for a couple of months and not being able to speak their language, but they were able to keep up with me in a class. Like, there was something in that. Or being on stage and I can rehearse till I'm blue in the face, but even when I get on stage, something's going to come through that I had not rehearsed because I've sort of opened up and just been a vessel for this project and for this experience. And so trying to put language to what that part of it is, and there's nothing that I can say about it except that it is spiritual because it's like otherworldly. It is not something that I could
Yeah.
myself take credit for,
Mm.
the way that I'm able to show up and do certain work or, perform at a certain level. Sure, some of it is preparation and skill building. And then I think that there are some parts of it that is just divine.
To be able to take people through the steps that you are, you've got much higher chance of getting them into a space where they are going to find a job with a little bit more confidence and less
Mhm.
doubt, and be able to speak their truth as they're sitting there in that interview space, not sort of scrambling for words,
Right.
all of that.
Yeah.
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 So we're nearly there, and that's once again, really quick. So, what are your hopes for listeners who hear your story and advice, and how do you envisage that your message can help them navigate their career path and find that greater fulfillment?
Yeah, I would say if you don't remember anything else from this conversation, remember you can, period. Like you can have the career that you dream of. You just have to give yourself permission to do it. One of the things we talked about before recording, are some of the stats about the workplace and careers. And one of the things that I like to bring up often is like how career dissatisfaction is negatively impacts your wealth and your health. So,
Mm,
health wise, if you hate your job, if you're tolerating your job, eventually it's going to show up as a physical symptom. Sleepless nights, gut issues, anxiety, depression, right? I don't know if anyone's ever followed the Find a Path thread on Reddit. And it's like all these people trying to figure out what they're supposed to do for their careers. And oh, I didn't use my college major. I feel like such a lose. Like it's just, it really weighs on you. People feel like they
yeah.
don't have a purpose. They don't have a passion. Then why am I here? What's the point of my existence? That's some heavy stuff, right? And it's like finding a way to work through that and then emerge on the other side doing work that you care about is really important to your actual health as a human being. And then
Mm,
also with the wealth part of it, the studies show, like from Business Insider, like I was saying, people who love their jobs, they get rich fast, like, or faster. They accumulate more wealth than people who don't love their jobs and they accumulate it faster. And so when I read that, I was like, why aren't more people talking about this? Why are we
yeah.
still walking around tolerating jobs we don't like if it's detrimental to our health and our wealth? And so back to your question, you can do work that matters to you. You can live your purpose and love your work. You just got to put some steps to it.
I have seen reports lately on that. Look at your bank account and the way your bank accounts are set out and how they're being managed. That's a sign of,
Hmm.
how you're feeling about what you're doing, your purpose, and all of that's not really aligning.
Yeah.
And another one I heard, it was a psychologist shared a blog, and he said, when someone's at the stage where they're not feeling great, they are potentially going to drop into that depressive state,
Hmm.
that they're feeling pressured because they have to keep working in that job they don't want,
Hmm.
that there's that sort of pressure. If you leave it too long, it's really hard to come out and find that creative space by yourself
Yeah.
in your heart to go, no, I can. So I think asking for help, like having someone like yourself
Hmm.
to be that steward,
Yeah.
I think is such a gift to reach out and say, hey, I can't really get this clear in my head right now. Can someone please guide me through this? I think it's really, really important to know it's okay to not know how to do this yourself.
1000%. That's why there are therapists and coaches, business coaches, career
Mm,
coach, right? Like and I rely on all of them to
yeah.
to help me like get me out of my stuck places and live a life that I'm proud of. So absolutely, I would second that deeply. Like get the help. There's nothing wrong with that.
Before we wrap up, there's a couple of things. What I did last week in the episode with Sherry Lawrence is I included some of those background facts and stats in the blog, the digital transcript, so they will be there. If that might even help someone who wants to reach out to you to have a look at those first, or if you're just that person that likes to understand reports, research, and studies. But also, you shared with me about your link. Can you just talk to that for a moment?
Absolutely. So, when we were talking before about how to move towards career fulfillment, like what are those steps? And I mentioned like match, make, and market. That first step in terms of like figuring out what the thing is that you want to do, is what I have to offer. It's a career or business match guide, and it just walks through some assessments you can check out, how to kind of do the reflection for yourself, and then what to do with that information once you've done it. I think I also included some additional resources on what that could look like for a business instead of just a job, and just like at least get you started with reflecting on what it is that you could be doing. And so you all can grab that. And then also, you'll be tapped into my daily career inspiration stories at lightmycareermatch.com.
Excellent. Okay, well, I will include that with anything that I'm sharing beyond this session today.
Thank you.
So thank you. Thank you so much for being here and joining me. I really appreciated having this conversation. And as I said, when we met in the intros, I felt like it was just perfect timing. Like you showed up
Yeah.
as a beautiful segue from what I've just covered with Sherry, who also is really focused on people loving what they do. So, yeah, I
Mhm.
think I can see that you're into empowering people. And I have heard everything that you've shared and it resonated with me. And, I just really wish you all the best with this, newly launched business to empower people in the work that they choose to do through having connected with you.
Thank you so much, Susan. It's been such a pleasure. And please let me know if there's anything I can do to support your business.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. Listeners, what was the one key takeaway you got from this conversation today and all that Shaté has shared with us here? If you have any questions for her or for me, please reach out to connect@susandunlop.com.au, or you can message me on LinkedIn or connect there. I'm also on Instagram as simply Lead, Believe, Create. I'm forever thankful to my beautiful guests for allowing me to understand them more and to share their stories. Trust that you are blessed even when you forget that you are blessed. Take care of yourself, and I look forward to being back soon. And bye for now.